Hello, and welcome to episode 13 of Quizzing Cameron, where I give you as actionable and practical advice as possible on your leadership and management questions. So if you come up with your own leadership or management question that you want to ask, go ahead and drop down into the replies to this video, and I'll be sure to get that in another episode. But with that said, let's get to the first question, and it comes from Laure. I'm going to try to say that name right. And it is, how do you handle a boss who tears down employees every time you build them up? He's the manager and I'm the assistant. And I know I've personally been in this position before, and it's not a pleasant one. The first thing to do to tackle this is really try to work on your relationship with your boss. You want to make sure that your boss trusts you and your judgment. So whether that's having a little bit more face time with them as far as regular updates, one-on-ones, communication, then that's something that you need to do. But what you want to do is you want to establish that trust that you know how to run your department, you know how to run your team, and even if they find something that isn't necessarily what they want to see, that they trust your opinion on it and they trust you to handle it in the best way possible. That's where you really want to go, and that allows you to protect your team from that negativity that gets brought in and mentioned to the team. That's the second part of this, is that you want to let the team know exactly what the story is and why that happened and what the boss was seeing. Truthfully, there's probably some kernel of truth to what your manager is saying. There, whether it's some simple things like tidying up the office, being punctual, that sort of thing, to returning customer calls and answering in a timely manner, dealing with customers, smiling, that sort of thing. There's probably a kernel of truth to it. And what you want to do is you want to give your team a frame of reference. The manager most likely is just coming in and just seeing a snippet, and this is what they saw. They saw this. And that helps the team understand where it's coming from, and it helps you transition into a coaching role from that. So it turns that negative and it turns it into a bit of a positive, or at least some sort of constructive negativity. I get the feeling it's a little bit more of a coming in, creating a whirlwind, and then walking out sort of situation. So that allows you to focus the clutter on the issue at hand. The other thing is to know the pet peeves. I've worked in hospitality for well over a decade, and one of the pet peeves is always cleanliness. And it seems ridiculous. I've always been in back of house positions, and it seems ridiculous that my desk needs to be neat and orderly when I'm picking up the phones or doing spreadsheets or what have you. But that's been a common pet peeve that I've dealt with. And when you know the pet peeves and you know your manager and what they're looking for, you can prep the team. You can tell them what they're looking for, and especially after you've had these sorts of experiences where they come in, the bosses come in and created this whirlwind, you can go ahead and focus that and give them some actionable things to hopefully prevent that in the future. That ounce of prevention, that 5 minutes that everybody takes to straighten up their desk before the boss comes in, can be worth a pound of regret in lost productivity and negativity in the office. So that's my advice for handling that all too common situation for us, Laura. The next question comes from Ramzi, and there's kind of a follow-up from Kylie on this, and that is, what would you advise for someone who is promoted to manager over his colleagues when he is younger and the department reaction was generally negative? Kylie has a similar question. When becoming a new manager that was previously a colleague in the same team, how is the best to establish that new respect? So everybody respects you instead of thinking of you as a colleague. And the thing to focus on, Ramzi in particular, when you have that negativity, is you want to be of service. And Kylie, that's certainly your role, and every leader's goal is you want to be of service to your team. And so what you want to focus on as much as possible is being as helpful as possible right from the get-go, so that they see that the supervisor, not to make comparisons, but the supervisory change and you moving to supervisor is something that helps them do their job. They need to see the positive that comes from that. The other thing that I always recommend for new leaders is to communicate, listen, and tell them what the priorities and what management is saying. Too often that communication isn't taking place in our organizations today, and so if you come in and you can tell them what the boss is looking for, what the goals are, what the priorities are, that's typically not something that they're getting on a regular basis. And then if you listen and take action on the things that they bring up, then again, that's something that sets you apart. Really, you just want to be on your best behavior. This is stuff that every leader should be doing every single day. But to put a name to it and put kind of a focus on it right from the get-go, that'll help you establish that respect. That'll help you set yourself apart from your colleague role and your supervisor role. And the last little bit is, especially when it's negative, is be careful about exerting your authority. I often tell new managers and new leaders that you really want to take a month off right from the get-go and learn. You want to learn your new role. You want to listen to your bosses. You want to understand what it is that they're looking for. You want to listen to your team. You want to kind of survey the scene in your new role. I know that you've got that energy and you want to come in, you want to change the world, and you want to do all these great things, but you need to pause for a second and make sure that you've got the right perspective, because how you viewed things when you were a team member and how you view them as the manager may be different. You may be getting a different take on things. So be very careful about exerting your authority right off the bat. You will exert it, you have that authority, but just be careful and manage that a little bit from the get-go, and that'll help do that, ease that transition that you have between your role as a colleague and your role as the boss. But congratulations to both of you on that. Our next question comes from Dhay. Actually posed the original question, and then it kind of got piled on from a few different people, Donna and Jeb in particular. And it's, what do you think of unfair and unethical management, both HR and operations? They cover up mistakes, absences, and are actually committing legal breaches. And there was a lot more that went to this, and it really comes about from bosses being completely unfair, completely unethical. And what I think about it is that they're horrendous leaders. And it's a situation that none of us want to be in. Hopefully we don't deal with that, where we have that unfair boss that treats people completely different and is completely flagrant about it. And in these cases, with these three individuals, their jobs are potentially at stake if they bring something up to higher management. And so that puts you in a very tough position. So first, I'm going to tackle the how you deal with the situation that you find yourself in, and that is, if the leadership role that is completely unfair is a rotating door, and if you have a fair amount of seniority in the organization, then it's worthwhile to stick it out. Odds are, depending on that rotating door of leadership, you may have to deal with this for a year or two, and if you like the job, you have that seniority, you don't want to start over again, then you definitely want to stick it out. If it's a situation where this person is going to potentially be there for a long time, this comes in with issues with the CEO, for instance, you probably need to start looking elsewhere. And it may be that, if there was a takeover and new management came in, new leadership came in, and you have that seniority, it may be something that you need to give up. Or you just have to deal with it. But that's where I really kind of draw the line, is how much seniority do you have in the organization, and how long are you going to have to realistically deal with this leader, as far as whether you want to jump ship or you want to stick around. Now, as far as being constructive and doing what every good employee should do, and that is bring up concerns like this to your leadership, when your boss is on the line, or when your job is on the line, as far as bringing this up where it could be looked at completely unfavorably and as insubordination, what you want to do is bring it up in the one logical step away. So let's say something simple like the air conditioning isn't working in the branch office comes up. You may, when the boss asks how things are going, you may give them an update on a couple of things and say, otherwise it's really hot in here. And so they will then take the next step of investigating the matter and finding out that the air conditioner is broken and the maintenance person hasn't been doing their job. That's the sort of passive way around it. The other way is to actually bring it up, but only in issues where you're going to get lost in the crowd. You basically have plausible deniability. It could be anybody that brought this up because 100 people saw the boss do this, or the HR person do this. And those are the instances where I want to say you can risk it, but you want to have that plausible deniability. That way, if it does come back on you for whatever reason, you are at least buffered a little bit from having the axe drawn, which is something that is horrendous and unfortunately happens in this day and age still, where people bring up legitimate issues and get canned because of it. So it's a tough spot. I wish you guys the best. Our last question today comes from Craig, and it's, how do you approach an unclear chain of command, middle management leapfrogging over the CEO's absolute authority? And this it's another difficult situation that people find themselves in. I always ask the follow-up question. So you'll be given that different directive from somebody, whether it's the CEO jumping over your direct manager, whether it's your manager jumping over the CEO's directive, and you always ask that follow-up question of, have you consulted with Bob about this because he gave a different direction on this? And you just want to make sure, you want to be helpful. You don't want it to come across as accusatory or anything like that. You want to be helpful. I just want to make sure because blank. I just want to make sure you knew about blank. And that makes sure it becomes clarifying on your part and helps them into the loop on this. Sometimes they are unaware of what the other leader has already given as far as a directive. That's very common. Sometimes they just are on some sort of power trip and feel like they want to exert that sort of authority on it. But either way, you've made them aware at that point. And in the cases where it is completely different directions and you're going to be starting to expend resources, you want to, as a follow-up, just say, I want to make sure that I'm not wasting my resources. So it's not personal, it's very job-focused, very issue-focused, and that's how you combat those two sorts of things. That way the person doesn't get defensive, because that's something that can be very common as well, is that your CEO has given a directive directly to you and has leapfrogged over the direct manager that should be having the authority over that, and they feel insecure about that and react in a defensive way. Likewise, the CEO can be defensive because in theory they do have ultimate authority over everything, but that's how you diffuse that personal nature and keep it issue focused. So that was a great last question for today, Craig. Again, I want to encourage everybody, if you have questions, drop those down into the replies and I'll be sure to get them on another episode of Quizzing Cameron. But for today, I'm signing off from sunny Las Vegas. Have a great one, everyone.